Hey everybody, today we are going to be talking about the film A Silent Voice. I love this movie for its profound analysis of bullying and forgiveness. But before we jump in, I wanted to give a brief content warning because there are multiple suicide attempts in this film. If you are sensitive to this type of content, please don't watch this video. A Silent Voice is a prolific movie for its analysis of mental health and bullying. The movie begins with the main character tying up loose ends so that he can commit suicide. This type of content is much needed because suicide is rarely touched upon in a meaningful way. It can be tough to cover suicide in a responsible manner. I felt like the director covered suicide in a positive way by addressing it, but not making it the focal point of the movie. To give a general overview of the plot, Shoya Ishida is the main character in the movie. When he was younger, he bullied a girl named Shoko Nishima. He picked on Shoko because she revealed to the class that she was deaf. Shoko used a notepad to communicate with her classmates. Ishida harassed Shoko so much that she changed her school. He wrote mean things on a chalkboard, he threw Shoko's hearing aid out a window, and he even mocked the way she spoke. Even though his classmates joined in, Ishida's excessive cruelty made him stand out. Ishida's friends began to antagonize him after the professor called him out. His cruelty towards Shoko ostracized him from his friends completely. Ishida understands the pain that Shoko felt, but he realized too late. Once Shoko leaves because of her abuse, then time skips forward. Shoko and Ishida are adults now. The rest of the story focuses on him making amends with Shoko for all the wrong he's done. At first, he decides he'd rather commit suicide than to make up for what he's done. But along the way, Ishida happens to make friends and tries to turn over a new leaf. But things get muddied when some of his old abusers reinsert themselves back into his life. Now that we have the plot laid out, let's take a look at what makes A Silent Voice such a powerful piece of media. The first reason this movie differentiates itself is we get to live as the bully. Being able to see life from the harasser's eyes helps to humanize abusive tendencies in a meaningful way. Oftentimes, our first instinct when we see an abuser is to disregard them as a person. We often assume that they are evil or mean-spirited. This isn't always the most fruitful way to address bullying. Stopping targeted harassment usually requires an understanding of the bully's life circumstances. Ishida's character is perfect in this way. He tormented Shoko to bolster his own ego and receive recognition from his classmates. Ishida is also transferring the abuse he received onto Shoko. In this way, he's perpetuating the cycle of abuse. One day, Shoko is trying to wipe some mean things off of a desk to save Ishida's feelings. Shoko's empathy motivates her to save Ishida from the pain she is so accustomed to. Ishida feels guilty, so he lashes out. Once time skips, we can see Ishida develop as a character, but some remnants of the past still remain. When Ishida reunites with Shoko, she cowers a bit because she is already ready to receive abuse. Instead of being demeaning, he gives Shoko her notebook and tries to communicate with her using sign language. We can see when he reaches out to Shoko, he has grown as a character. Ishida's character development is off the charts, but in a subtle way. We can see how much his character has evolved, even though we haven't engaged with him for years. His character is in stark contrast with his earlier self. Ishida can sign now, and he treats Nishima with kindness instead of cruelty. Ishida's past abuse caused him to be socially isolated and ostracized. The director chose to put X's on all the faces of the characters. This is to symbolize that Ishida feels like he is alone and that he can't relate to anyone. Ishida believes that he is incapable of making new friends. He avoids eye contact and isolates himself as punishment for his wrongdoings in the past. The director is helping to illuminate the ramifications of being an abuser. Being mean and spiteful towards others can feel good in the moment, but it can have lasting impacts. Even after all the horrible things Ishida did, we are still able to empathize with him. He then sees another person getting badgered and gives up his bike to settle the conflict. This scene is moving because Ishida isn't abusive anymore and doesn't want to become a bystander. This is Ishida's first attempt to save someone from the suffering he's endured. He makes his first friend in a while thanks to his efforts. Ishida continues to make amends for the horrible things he has done in the past. By righting his wrongs, Ishida begins to appreciate life more in general. While having fun with his friends, he questions whether these feelings are okay. He hasn't completely forgiven himself for all of his wrongdoings. Ishida feels genuine guilt for experiencing happiness. This can be one of the real-life outcomes of bullying. Ishida realized he stripped someone else of their happiness, so he wasn't able to appreciate his own. Ishida begins to feel guilty about the past. He feels like he is the sole reason for Shoko's abuse. At the end of the film, all of the exes fall away from the other characters in the movie. Ishida views everyone normally again, instead of viewing them as people he can't interact with. Ishida's empathy from his abuse allowed him to grow throughout the story. The pain he endured ended up becoming one of his strengths. Ishida was able to make friends and experience happiness because he learned from his pain. Ishida eventually receives forgiveness from himself and begins to love life again. Although Ishida changed in a meaningful way, many characters in this movie don't. A silent voice has many strong suits, and one of the strongest elements of the story are the side characters. For this video, I will primarily be discussing the destructive characters. Shimada, Ueno, and Kawaii all helped Ishida harass Shoko, although they never had accountability for their actions. These three characters help to highlight the different outcomes of bullying. Let's begin with Ueno. Ueno constantly helped harass Shoko when she was younger, but after the time skip, her character becomes important. Ueno tries to reinsert herself back into Ishida's life. She wants to feel the same as when they were kids harassing Shoko. Ueno decides to make fun of Shoko again when Ishida tries to reach out to her. She is an interesting character because she starts out without having an X over her face. Ishida trusts Ueno to some extent. She doesn't have an X on her face initially, but when she begins antagonizing Shoko, then the X appears. Ishida no longer trusts Ueno after this point, until later in the movie. Ueno eventually hangs out with Ishida enough to build his trust, until she tries to reintroduce him to Shimada. Where Ishida matures and grows as a character, Ueno becomes stagnant. Ueno's character is important to show how some people never stop being bullies without gaining an outside perspective. Instead of taking accountability for her actions, Ueno projects her issues onto Shoko. She blames Shoko for stealing Ishida away. Ueno refuses to introspect about her own horrible behaviors. Ueno's emotions escalate until the point where she confronts Shoko. Ueno blames everything on her, because she genuinely believes that Shoko ruined the dynamic that was there before. However, Ueno doesn't understand that things don't usually happen in a vacuum. Luckily, Ishida normalizes treating Shoko with respect. Ueno eventually realizes that her being mean to Shoko doesn't really serve a purpose. Ueno decides to start treating Shoko with respect. Shimada is the second bully in the group, but his dynamic with Ishida is different. He ostracized Ishida after he was deemed the class bully. Shimada went out of his way to make Ishida feel horrible by spreading rumors around. He even went as far as to pretend to not like his previous hobbies. When time skips forward, we don't get to see Shimada in a meaningful way. It's hard to say whether his character has changed since the past, but Shimada still adds plot to the story. Ueno trying to rekindle the relationship between Shimada and Ishida can parallel pretty well onto the real world. Bullies have a tendency to stay together. Oftentimes, abusers have a hard time maintaining relationships because of their abusive tendencies. They often harass members of the group into submission as well. Ueno, in a way, is trying to continue the cycle of bullying. Luckily, Ishida realizes this and leaves immediately. The final antagonist to Ishida is Kawaii. She is a little more difficult to pin down because she never harassed Shoko as overtly as Shimada or Ueno. This does not absolve her of her culpability though. Kawaii was a bystander in the mean group. She never wanted accountability cast onto her. When she was younger, Kawaii pretended to cry to make Ishida look like the only one at fault. Later on, when Ishida and Kawaii reconnect, we can see a similar encounter take place. Kawaii has stagnated as a character, just like Ueno. Instead of taking accountability for her past actions, she tries to push the blame solely onto Ueno and Ishida. Kawaii, Shimada, and Ueno are all great characters despite the horrible things they've done. They really help to personify the negative elements of bullying. The lack of growth from the three characters also helps to illuminate how much different Ishida is now, even though he led the abuse in the past. These three don't have the first-hand experience with bullying that Ishida has. That's why they lack perspective and don't develop much as characters. The final thing that makes A Silent Voice a masterpiece is its overall message about the power of forgiveness. No one in this movie embodies forgiveness more than Shoko. Despite being constantly tormented by her peers, Shoko always tries to befriend her enemies. She is very strong as a person because of her ability to forgive. When Ishida bullies Shoko, she signs the word friends because it's genuinely what she wants. She doesn't hate Ishida, she wants to be his friend to understand him better. The same can be said for Ueno. Ueno confronts Shoko about her past and reveals her true feelings. She tells her how much she truly despises her. Shoko responds by explaining she doesn't hate Ueno. Shoko understands from her abuse that it's more fruitful to be communal instead of combative. She doesn't want to hurt others because she knows more than anyone else how bad it can feel to hate yourself. Shoko does have forgiveness issues though. She believes that all of the tension is created by her existence. Shoko has forgiven everyone besides herself. Abuse victims often feel like their abuse had to have a reason, so it's not uncommon for a survivor of abuse to blame themselves. Shoko's guilt reaches a breaking point and she attempts suicide. Fortunately, Ishida is there to catch her, inadvertently sacrificing himself. Ishida has the same struggle as Shoko in terms of forgiveness. He is also internalizing his guilt and is unable to forgive himself. I think this speaks to the power of forgiveness. Forgiveness can be either relieving or destructive. Both the main characters almost committed suicide over their guilt. This is the director's way of illustrating how cathartic forgiveness can be. Ishida and Shoko seem miserable throughout the movie, but when they learn how to forgive, they suddenly seem much happier. Learning how to forgive can be challenging, but if this movie shows us anything, it's that forgiveness is ultimately a healthier way to cope with our unique life experiences. Harboring hatred or resentment towards oneself or others can feel good, but those negative feelings can fester and ultimately harm us as individuals. So as a final takeaway from the video, I encourage anyone who watches this video. Next time you're feeling upset or resentful, take a deep breath and try to forgive whoever you're upset with. I was bullied extensively in the past because I was overweight, and forgiveness has been a powerful tool to help me cope with my experience. Before I learned how to forgive, I felt nothing but contempt for my bullies. I was constantly upset thinking about my past experiences. After learning how to forgive, I realized that harboring these resentments served no purpose other than to harm myself. I hope that one day we can live in a world of forgiveness, so that our experiences elevate us and not hold us back. Thanks for watching another one of my videos. It means so much to me. If you like this video or my other content, please like and subscribe to my channel. It really does help. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts or personal experiences with bullying. Thanks again. Have a great day.